The Marc Marquez winning streak is over, but it's a Marquez that wins again in MotoGP. Alex Marquez, fantastic bounce back after his sprint disaster on Saturday, takes the Catalan Grand Prix win from Marc in second. And yeah, it was a really interesting weekend. It was the weekend where I think for the first time in a long time, Marc Marquez wasn't the fastest, and he was beat on outright pace, and that to me is, I mean, I think at this point of the season it's a good thing, because after he'd won the sprint after Alex's mistake, I was thinking he's going to go unbeaten for the rest of the year, the way everything was falling for him. But yeah, good to see Alex bounce back and maybe proves the doubters wrong, who maybe criticised him for the slump that he's had. But I think this weekend was a real show of the true talent that he has and the love of Barcelona that he has as well. I think that makes it 4 wins now across all classes for Alex Marquez, so it's a very, very much a circuit that he likes. Joining me to discuss the weekend is Lewis Duncan and Pete McLaren. And Pete, we'll start with you. Mark's leads 182 points. Delayed now, he can't win it in Misano, which you look at it two ways, it's either a good or a bad thing. I think he's kind of happy that it's not there. What did you make of the weekend? It was interesting, so it was for the Marquez's anyway.
It was, wasn't it? Yeah, as you say, the streak ends, doesn't it? I think there was almost a bit of relief for Marc that it has finished, because he's been asked about it every week, isn't he? I think mentally he kind of accepted the streak was over in the sprint when he backed off, didn't he? And just said, "Look, I can't match Alex." For me, that was when in his head the sprint the run ended, if you like. So, and it just shows the position he's in, that he's able to do that. He doesn't have to worry about points, the odd point here or there. But I mean, 15 wins in a row, and that's what it is for me. I know that the record books say it's 7 Grand Prix wins, which is nowhere near the 10 he got in 2014, but that doesn't really do it justice, does it? I think it's 15 in a row. That shows the level that he's had this year, the level of control he's had in a lot of these races. The contrast with Sunday's race, where he didn't have that control. He got the lead, didn't he? And he was, really slow pace at the start, doing what he could, his strategy to try and do something against the superior pace of Alex. But ultimately, Alex was just faster. And as you mentioned in the intro, Alex has been saying, isn't he, that this sort of slump he's been through, look, the speed has still been there. It's been incidents, accidents, penalties. We've still got the speed, but there were question marks, weren't there? People wondering, is he going to be able to come to show that sort of winning pace he's had at the beginning of the year? And he did so. Bit of a blip, big blip in the sprint, but he came back from that. And it's only the 5th time that Marc's lost a race on a Sunday this year. So yeah, great for Alex. But you could see that Marc really, I mean, he looked almost as happy as if he'd won it anyway, didn't he? To be honest, let's be fair. And the title fight goes on mathematically, but it's a question of when, not if, isn't it?
Yeah, it really is. Lewis, what was your assessment of the weekend? It was quite entertaining, to be honest, I think, with the dynamic of the 24 versus the 25. But I think really from Friday, you could see that Alex Marquez had the 10th or 2 in the pocket, didn't he?
Yeah, the pace analysis at the end of Friday was very much Alex was the strongest of the field. It wasn't by much over Marc. To be fair, the two Marquez brothers did look like they were going to be the front runners. The KTMs were quick, but they kind of did their work on the soft tyres, so there was that question mark there about what the medium pace would be. I think even before that, though, we were all coming to Barcelona, and I think both brothers included, looking at this as being Alex's weekend. I think very much in the same way that we came to Silverstone, and it was very much seen as this is kind of going to be Alex's weekend if everything goes right. It didn't at Silverstone. Obviously, we had the odd kind of crash at the start of the race and then the red flag, and then he had to use his second bike, and the bike didn't feel comfortable, and there was a real big opportunity there, and since then Alex hasn't really had an opportunity to win a Grand Prix. Some good podiums in Aragon and Mugello, but Marc was a cut above those weekends. Then there was the injury problems, and then, as you guys have said, there's just been this slump. There's been mistakes. There's been unnecessary penalties. I think from the last 5 or 6 rounds before Barcelona, the average point score for Alex was 10 points. Versus Marc, which was obviously a full 37 every weekend. So, for a long time we've been talking about, well, could it be Misano? Could this happen? And Marc has gone, no, it's impossible. But, Alex made it possible by, one reason or another. So, Barcelona was an important weekend to get that slump overturned, but yes, it's delaying the inevitable essentially, but I think it was an important one mentally to go to a track where you know you are strong, where you know you can beat Marc, where you know he is a bit weaker, you know there is weakness to exploit, and put him in his place. The fact that it's then delayed the championship to Japan is quite a big thing, I think, because you know, from Marc's perspective, it goes on a bit. So you go to Misano, we get to a situation where if he's not comfortable, is he going to go all in like he didn't do in Barcelona? You know, does that open the door again for Alex? You know, you get to Japan. The longer this kind of goes on and the more cautious Marc has to be, the more there is opportunities there for Alex, who's now refound his form, who's got that confidence back, to take advantage of that. And who knows, you know, touch wood, you know, that there's nothing happens. But if Marc gets an injury and Alex keeps up this streak and all of a sudden the points start coming down, it does just, you know, change the complexion of things. So yes, it's kind of an inevitability that this is going to be a done deal in Japan. But, you know, the fact that it goes on does leave that door open for those possibilities of something unseen happening, you know. That's racing. We didn't think Marc was going to break his arm when he did in 2020, and look what happened for the 4 years after that. So, you know, it is quite a significant result for a lot of reasons.
It is, yeah. And I'm just gonna take the glory here. I did call it. I did say Alex would win, and in the article in July, wherever it was, and in the podcast, I'm really glad about that one, to be honest, because I don't know what it is with Alex, and particularly this year in the Spanish circuits. It's obviously been it means a lot to him, obviously, because he's from there, and I think that the weekend that he had, and you touched on about Silverstone, I still think that really, really got him and really frustrated him, because it was a weekend that was almost the opposite this weekend. He had threw it away in the sprint when it looked like he had it sewed up, and I think to bounce back in a Grand Prix, probably harder to do, because the pressure kind of, not saying it was less, but he had less time to kind of think about it. And Michele Massini talked about it after, where they said to him, Alex, 5 minutes you think about this and you get rid of it out of your system to think about what you've done and how you can reset. And I think when it happened to Silverstone, because he looked like, and I'd heard the other riders say that they could have won with one hand behind his back, that's how much pace he had. He then had to wait weeks to think about to the next Grand Prix, and obviously it was Aragon where Marc then goes and beats him, and it thinks that's an opportunity gone. But for Alex to prove that he can bounce back like he did, real show of mental strength that he has, and like it helps too that maybe the fire was kind of fueled because of the negative comments had been eaten at him, and he just really impressed me yesterday. I think showed a lot of maturity and how he's been the second best rider this year, and I don't think people really do give him the credit. You know, we saw all this stuff early half of the year where it was just, oh, he's lucky to be there. He's on the 24, but he has the tool, but you have to use it right, and he is the one who's maximizing it. You look at the other 24 and Frankie Morbidelli, and it's harsh looking at Fermin Aldegar, but they're not at the level Alex Marquez has been this year consistently, and I think that. Yeah, I was really happy to see him win. I think it's always fun when he gets one over on Marc, and it's very rare this year. But you could see that he had his number yesterday, and that to me was just really impressive of a character building moment for Alex Marquez and how people kind of look at him now going forward. But this weekend will be difficult, I think. Marc's really good around Misano, whether he'll tell you it or not. His record's stellar, and it's a circuit that's completely different to Barcelona. Obviously, it's got so much grip compared to the lack of grip that we've seen this weekend. But yeah, Alex Marquez for me, I'm not saying 10 out of 10 weekend, 9.9. The sprint crisis just takes it off. But yeah, I think that there's so much positives for him going ahead for the rest of the season. And Pete, just to touch about Marc, and you talked about the streak. I mean, he didn't seem too bothered, like you say, yesterday. He was celebrating like crazy with his brother and the videos after in the Gresini garage. Do you think that he's relieved that it's not going to Misano, given all the connotations and the noise around it? You know what I mean by that. Do you think he's happy to wait maybe another race weekend?
Yeah, I mean, even if it went to Misano, it would have needed a complete disaster, wouldn't it, for Alex, and a another double, if you like, for Marc.
Yeah.
So yeah, it would have put more pressure on Marc, certainly to do the double side from his point of view, and then you're almost wishing bad luck on other people, aren't you? So, I mean, there will be pressure this weekend. Obviously, Ducati's home round. I think that Marc will want to win this weekend.
Of course,
say a bit more. I think that there's a lot of pride at stake, isn't there? If you're any Ducati rider to win at your manufacturer's home track, just like if you're racing for a Japanese manufacturer, you want to win at Motegi. So yeah, I think that Marc will want to. The streak's over now, so now it's just about individual race wins, and the title will come along with that. But yeah, I think Marc's going to be pretty fired up to win this weekend. To be honest, I think especially if it's another Ducati in front. If circumstances arise where it's a different brand of bike or something that's not a direct comparison, if you like, with Marc, then maybe fair enough. But he's going to be, well, he's their new hero, if you like, at Ducati, and he's going to want to celebrate that in front of the Ducati fans at Ducati's home track. So yeah, I think we'll see Marc pushing pretty hard this weekend.
Lewis, I want to bring you in on this. You put a really good post out on Twitter about the Constructors' Championship. Obviously was wrapped up by Ducati at the weekend. Give the listeners or people watching the breakdown on the points. It's pretty frightening, isn't it? How one person has essentially won this Constructors this year.
Yeah, I mean, we Constructors was one on, and then it's a shame that Alex crashed, because that kind of success would have been his a little bit, But yeah, we've Ducati have been dominant. We're at the point now where mathematically a Ducati rider will win the championship. I thought it was a funny stat that Ducati put out, given that really, to suggest that either Alex Marquez or Pecco Bagnaia can win the championship this year at all is a little bit far-fetched. But, the Constructors' points, for those that don't know, it's the top bike home from each manufacturer that scores the points. It's not like F1 where it's a double, it's a combined thing. So, 541 points for Ducati after 15 rounds. Marc scored 454 of those, of which he has scored a total of 487 this year. So I don't know what that works out as a percentage. It's got what? That's about 87%
or something like that. Yeah.
Alex Marquez has scored 62 of those points, and Pecco Bagnaia has scored 25, of which that was his Austin win back in March, even end of March, wasn't it? So, Marquez gets beaten, but he still. There was another highlight of just how strong he's been this season with that Constructors' Championship being wrapped up for Ducati. I think the fact that he's come to a weak circuit of his in Barcelona and come away with, a sprint win and a narrow kind of defeat in second, really, again, is another kind of concerning factor for his rivals, that when there is a weakness there, you've got to be really on point to beat them, and because of that, it further highlights the job that Alex Marquez has done. There is a little bit of a question mark of, and Marc said himself, Alex pushed. There was about a point lap 20, 19-20, where Alex pushed. The gap was about 3 tenths. He got it up to 8 tenths, and he forced Marquez to go with him. And Marc made quite a big mistake at turn 10, where he did kind of nearly throw it away. And he said at that point, okay, look, I'm done. And then he did say afterwards, like, I could have gone all in, but today wasn't that day. So it's that little bit of a question mark of, chains off, what would Marc have done? Probably he would have, after that mistake, gone again and tried to, force something on the last lap. But fundamentally, Alex forced him into a mistake and forced him to think twice. And not many people over the last 12 years have done that. Really, in a proper head-to-head, you think, what? Jorge Lorenzo, maybe? Dovi? Rossi on a couple of occasions.
Vinales maybe once or twice.
Yeah, Fabio a couple of times. That not many people have done that, and for Alex to do that, and we haven't really seen this season at all either, where in a proper head-to-head fight that Marc Marquez has beaten on pure pace. The last time we really saw that was Silverstone Sprint, and arguably Silverstone is the weakest circuit for Marc, even worse than Barcelona's. Yeah. Bez won that race, but it wasn't on a pure pace thing against Marc Marquez, is what I'm getting at. Le Mans was a weird wet race. Austin, of course, he crashed out. Jerez, he crashed as well. So there was that thing as well for Alex's first one. Marc wasn't involved in that at all. So what could have happened? I think this is why this is such a significant win for Alex, because Marc exerted a lot of pressure, and we know how good Marc is at the end of races, and Alex asked some questions that Marc couldn't answer, and we haven't seen that all season, someone do that, certainly in a Grand Prix, and I'm excited to see what that does for Alex's confidence going forward, because the rest of the season, if he can keep that on, keep putting that pressure on, maybe beat Marc's fair and square, especially Marc when he's won the championship and he can just throw caution to the wind. If he can go up and beat Marc like that, then you go into 2026 looking at a rider who will be a much bigger threat to Marc than Marc might even kind of realise, if you based on what we've seen this year. And all of a sudden that could change things. You going back to Silverstone, when he won that sprint, Alex, he was only 19 points behind Marc. That's how close the championship was at that point. A couple of mistakes from Marc, yeah, but Alex's form was such that he kept himself right there, and had he won that Grand Prix, that gap would have come down, and who knows what would have happened over the next few rounds, because he was right there with Marc. The points gap wouldn't have extended as it did. We wouldn't then maybe necessarily be in this situation where we were looking at Misano as a championship deciding race. We would have 100% been looking at maybe Indonesia or something like that. So, I think we can't forget just how good a job Alex has done this season. This mid-season slump aside, the start of the year, Alex is brilliant, and I think now he's had this win and had this weekend and gotten over that mistake as well on Saturday, we could well see a return to that form, I think, for the rest of the season. There's a lot of good tracks coming up for Alex and for the GP24 as well.
Absolutely. There is, yeah, and this weekend as well, Misano, just to add in the factor, it's Grassini's home race. They'll have that livery, I assume, which is always a beauty to look at. It's a good time to be a Grassini rider. It's a good time to be Alex Marquez, so let's see what happens. Pete, the third place in Enea Bastianini, KTMs over the whole weekend were really surprisingly good, and I think on Saturday the what was it, the Red Bull Rookies race we called it, because they all looked like they were all the same. The 4th, 5th and 6th for Costa, Bastianini and Binder. I think that was a real indicator for what could have happened in the longer race, and it did with Bastianini, who takes his first Grand Prix podium for KTM. How did you assess their weekend? Because Binder being fast on Friday was, to me, like, wow, after the struggles that he's had, this is something here that they're really progressing.
Yeah, I think it was a big weekend for KTM, because they've been strong at the previous ones where they were stop and go tracks, weren't they? And their bike has sort of been quite good at that. So it's a bit like with Alex, how would they do here, or how would Marc do here, a different type of track? And the package worked again. So I think it's a good sign for KTM for the rest of this year now, that after these sort of early troubles that they had, they seem to have a package now. They can go to different tracks, different grip levels, different characteristics, and they've got more than one rider fast, which again is just underlining that it's not just one rider making the difference on the day. So as you say, Bastianini was fast, Acosta was fast, went with the soft tyre, didn't he? I mean, it was a gamble as such, but I mean, maybe it cost him third place. It wasn't a disaster, because I don't see him taking the fight to Marc or Alex anyway. So he didn't really have too much to lose, given as Lewis said, he hadn't spent much time on the medium, so it would have been a bigger unknown. He might have suffered more on the medium. So I don't think it was a disaster him going with that. I think he tried it in the warm up and really wasn't that quick on the medium. So I think they thought, look, we've done loads of laps on the soft, we know we can get it to the end. So yeah, he lost out to Bastianini, as you say. He takes his Sunday podium in front of the new boss, Gunther Steiner, and Hervé as well. So they were there watching on, weren't they, the older new bosses? So great result for him. He's been brewing for a while, isn't it? He's had this pace, but he's had incidents and things like that have sort of prevented him since Brno adding to that sprint podium. So it's looking good for them. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be interesting this weekend. Obviously, Misano, Bastianini is strong around there. How can he do there? Can he make this next step now and actually fight with the Marquezes? That's what we're waiting for somebody to really do, isn't it? We've seen Bezza's been up there, we've seen Acosta up there sometimes, people that get to be best of the rest, but not really actually fight with Marc especially. So who knows? If KTM can keep building this speed that they've got. But yeah, I think it was a strong weekend for them to show that their bike is also competitive on the fast corner tracks as well, should we say?
Yes, really promising weekend. I mean, it's a shame about Maverick and his injury struggles still, because he's still struggling so much with his shoulder. And I honestly think if he was fit, we probably would have seen KTM's right up there in that sprint, all of them. It would have been really entertaining. But Yeah, Bastianini for me at one point yesterday, I thought, geez, he's going to win this thing because you know what he's like on the tires. But I think we've seen the limit of him in the KTM and how he's still learning with the tires. Because if that's Bastianini on a Ducati, he goes right to the end with the Marquez's, I think. But it's from where he was to where he is now is really impressive, Lewis, isn't it? For Tech 3 especially, I think the key to Tech 3 are the fastest KTM. I know they're all factory, but still, that to me is a win for them too, in front of, like Pete says, with the new bosses.
Yeah, I think so. As Pete says, this has been building for a while, really since kind of Bruno time was when KTM kind of started to kick forward a bit. Initially, it was, obviously Maverick's been quick all season until his injury, and then, there've been flashes of speed for Acosta once he started to kind of move more towards that Vinales setup. But kind of before the summer break, we have seen Bastianini take that step forward, and he did. He said a few rounds ago that we turned this bike upside down, and I still couldn't figure it out. So there was a point where I was just like, if it's not the bike, then I must be the problem. And I think that's really been the key thing there for Bastianini, is that he's realised that, okay, the bike did need to come forward. It did need to make some steps. It wasn't a great bike to begin with. We know that for a fact. Maverick was able to start getting the best out of it with setups. Didn't really work for Bastianini. He has quite an aggressive braking style. It was which was not something that necessarily the KTM was super good at. So that they needed to kind of develop the bike there. We got those new updates in Austria with the fairing and I think there was a new chassis as well. I think there's been a new exhaust as well, which clearly has just helped things along, and the setups have worked. And Bastianini has just had that time to figure it out. And now we're here. So yeah, I think you look at, like as Pete says, Misano is going to be a great opportunity. You look at, he won the Thailand sprint last year. He's always quick in Sepang. There's a lot of good opportunities. Yeah, there's a lot of great opportunities coming up, and I think that tire management thing is really important because it's kind of, if you don't have the raw pace to go up against Marc Marquez, like Alex did this weekend, that he just was faster, then you need to kind of have an extra weapon there to take that fight to him. And one thing Mark's been really strong at is tyre management. And it's Bastianini's forte. The most important thing for me is the fact that Bastianini's figured out qualifying. So he can use that kind of that advantage. I think had he cleared Pedro quicker in the Grand Prix, I think he might have been able to go with the Ducatis a bit more. Pedro being on the soft tyre just kind of led to a bit of a cork in the bottle, where once Bastianini was through, the gap was about 6/10 to Marquez, but I do just think a few laps earlier he could have put a bit more pressure on Marc, which then would have kind of forced him to up his pace, but a bit more pressure on Alex, and then who knows, them two chewing up the tyres, maybe Bastianini come through. I thought the same as you, Jordan. I thought this was going to be Bastianini's race, but I do think it's coming. It does feel very much like the first KTM win this season is going to come for Bastianini now, not Acosta or Binder or Vinales. It's just that step forward he's made, and he looks better. He looks back to how he was when he was on the Gresini Ducati, even better than he was last year.
I was going to say that, yeah.
On those 2 years in the factory bike, he looks as good as he was when he was winning Grand Prix a few years ago. So I do think over the next few rounds we're going to see a KTM win, and it will be Enea Bastianini.
I'm really happy for him, to be honest. I think you seen how he was at the start of the year was like, is this really it? Are we going to get this for 2 years, and then could potentially Enea Bastianini sort of fade into superbikes or whatever? I kind of had that worry, but no, the guy is rock solid as a talent, and I think if for me he gets overtaken the weekend, that one on Acosta in the turn one with the rear off the ground was just, that's proper overtaking right there. Other manufacturers to look at. Yamaha, not Yamaha, but Fabio Quartararo, really, but I can't understand it anymore, Pete. Like, we go into a weekend and you get the Thursday out the way, and it's like, Yamaha are probably going to struggle. Freddie he was unlucky to miss out in Q2, but then he goes Q1 to the front row, and he's second, and he probably nearly wins the sprint because Marc wins it, but only saves it. And a P5 in the Grand Prix, Quartararo, really... what else can you say? He's extracting everything from that bike and even more.
He is, isn't he? And as you say, it is confusing, isn't it? He looked really frustrated on Friday, didn't he? Almost clearly not happy with the bike, everything else. And then next thing you know, he's putting it on the front row in qualifying. And I mean, I've said it before, but for me, Fabio is the fastest guy in MotoGP this season. In pure speed over one lap. I think what he's doing with that bike is incredible. That obviously helps him in the races to be starting nearer the front and everything else. But still, like you say, on a low grip circuit, you never quite know how the Yamaha is going to perform on low grip, do you? I mean, they're suffering with grip, but then they say, look, when it's low grip, the guys that have more grip than us can't use it, so we don't suffer so much. So it's really hard to know which way it's going to go with them on the sort of low grip. But Fabio, as you say, really just carrying them again, isn't he? And showing that, big test today, Monday, isn't it? The V4, the first ride on the V4. They need to persuade him to stay on, don't they? I mean, they've made a load of huge changes. It's, to be honest, it's hard to see what else they can do. They brought in a satellite team. They've made all these changes to the engineering. They brought in the Europeans. Now they're building a V4. There isn't really anything else they can do other than have a bike that gives him what he needs, isn't it? That's the thing that's missing. And I think we're sort of seeing that from Fabio, where it's almost like, look, now I need to see things happen, because there's nothing else to wait in the pipeline, is there, really, if you know what I mean? There's no other big change that they need to make that's going to transform their fortunes, other than to just do it, if you know what I mean. And that's obviously the hardest part, and a lot is resting on this V4, and so we'll see how that gets on. But Fabio again this weekend just showing that we've made a lot of comparisons with 2019 this year, haven't we, with Marc? 2019 was also a great year for Fabio, wasn't it? It was the year where he stepped up and took the fight to Marc. Misano, I think, that we're coming up to now, was another track where, he was the one putting the pressure on Marc that season, when really not many people could they? And, we've got both of those guys now. We've had this break of 5 years, and both of them are still really at the top of their game. It's pretty impressive. But, Fabio certainly deserves to be at the front, I think, fighting with Marc. And we all want to see that. And Yamaha obviously are doing everything they can to make it happen. And, let's hope it happens soon.
Yeah. Lewis, what do you think of his weekend? I shouldn't be surprised with Quartararo anymore, because he does this a lot, but it's like, it just, when you keep seeing it, you're like, Jesus, if this guy had a bike that he could regularly fight with, it would be a completely different championship, wouldn't it?
Yeah, I mean, if you're Yamaha management right now, you've got to be smacking your head against the wall. The fact you haven't been able to deliver him a bike, because look what you've got in your hands. I mean, it's insane that this has been wasted. This is, with all due respect, but you look at the rest of the Yamaha stable, and it's not even half the level of Quartararo, let alone, anywhere near it. They've got such a gem on their motorcycle that everyone should be angry at Yamaha, not just Fabio, because he's committed a lot of years to them, and they've continued to kind of underperform. And this weekend wasn't really shaping up to be anything special. Low grip, we know the Yamaha struggles there, but somehow actually things seem to work out, which we kind of saw earlier in the year at Jerez, where again Fabio thought, hot track, low grip, it's going to be a bit of a struggle, and of course he ended up pole position on the podium. So when the Yamaha gets into the right window, Fabio can let his talent take over, and we saw that. We saw that in qualifying. We saw that in the sprint. We saw that in the Grand Prix. We know the Yamaha struggles initially in the early phases of races with grip, but then the pace comes to him, and we saw Fabio actually fighting with riders, overtaking them up to fifth, which by Yamaha's standards this year is a fantastic result. And I think it's come at the right time as well, with the V4 test coming along. We know it's happening today. We know there was been another chance on Misano after the bike's been raced by Augusto Fernandez. So yeah, there's a lot of riding on this. And yeah, you just hope for Yamaha's sake that they really have got something proper underneath them with this V4, because Fabio's not lost none of his talent. And you look around at the grid now, you look, obviously, Ducati's going to have seats, KTM's going to have seats, Aprilia's going to have seats, Honda's on its way up, it's going to have seats. These are all good packages right now that have, won races or are very capable of winning races. If you're Fabio Quartararo and you're not instantly convinced by this V4, you've got to start thinking about life beyond Yamaha, because he can't afford to waste any more years. I think what happened to Marc will be something that he's quite keenly aware of, that it's very easy to be at the top of your game and then all of a sudden for it to be ripped away from you for one reason or another, and you don't want to be in a situation where you let it pass you by because you didn't take a chance or you didn't make the right career decision or whatever. I think Yamaha's had long enough. I think that's fair enough. People like to kind of go, oh well, he shouldn't have signed that contract, he went for the money, blah blah blah. He was offered in a prettier contract. Yamaha put a lot of money in front of him, but I think Fabio genuinely believed what Max Bartolini was telling him. I think he genuinely believed at the time in the future of the project. We don't know what kind of role Lynn Jarvis played in all this as well. I think probably quite a significant one in terms of convincing him of the project. He's given a lot. You could say what you want about the money, whatever. He's given a lot of years now, and he's not gotten his return on investment. So, yeah, Yamaha needs to really, really get its act together with this V4 and for the rest of the season, or else, it will very likely lose Fabio, and you can't blame him for making that decision.
You can't. No, I'm really interested. Obviously, Fabio announced it on Friday that he was testing today. We don't actually know what the crack is there, if the weather's fine, if it's what's going on, but like I say, he will try it next week regardless at Misano after Augusto Fernandez tries it this weekend, which will be quite exciting to see. We'll talk about that shortly, but the last thing I want to mention, gents, about the Barcelona weekend, just to give a brief rundown, I'll give a shout to Ayagura. I think it was his best result since maybe Qatar, I think, or one of those. So a rookie who, I don't know if it's quite ironic that he has his best result's been at Buriram, where he tested, and then he tests again. Obviously, his first test ever was on MotoGP back at Catalunya, and then he has a good race. So I don't know if Agura just needs a second time round and everything, but it's really good to see him have really good late pace on the Aprilia, and I suppose he was the real highlight for their weekend because it was shambolic. I mean, on Saturday it wasn't their fault that Martin got wiped out by Morbidelli, Aldegar took out Bezzecchi then crashed. I don't know if Morbidelli made contact, but maybe it looked like there was at turn one. Martin kind of struggled. I think he was 10th at the end, but yeah, a disappointing weekend for Aprilia, and I suppose Agura kind of resurging again is a good thing. But we want to talk about the other side of the factory Ducati box, Pete. We said on this podcast all year, if you've been listening, it can't get worse for Pecco. Friday and Saturday, I mean, that was the rock bottom of it in terms of the practice stuff and the qualifying. It was a disaster. I think he was 21st and 23rd on Friday, 21st in qualifying. He gets to P14 in the sprint, and then kind of salvages a really good ride. To be honest, yesterday the start was mega, and you see it from the helicopter shot. He made a brilliant start and he ended up finishing in P7. But what's going on there?
And also, we should say, I think the reason it was such a bad weekend was it came from sort of this hope after Balloton Park, wasn't it? It wasn't just that, well, nothing's changed, so hey, we've had another bad weekend. It was, we might have found something here. We've made a big change, and yeah, it just all evaporates, doesn't it? It's a bit like, I guess, the second time this year after the Aragon test and the bigger breaks, and they thought, oh, okay, we found a direction here. And then it disappears, but this was, as you say, a bigger drop, if you like, wasn't it? Where he really just back at the field and struggling, and and another weekend where he's looking at his times from last year and thinking, I'd be up there fighting for the win a year ago if I could just do what match what I was doing last year. So yeah, really, really difficult weekend for Pecco. I think Digi is saying the similar sort of thing. He's just got to keep the bike as it is now, isn't it? And just ride it to the strengths of the bike. I just can't see. I guess you could say the Misano test coming up is the last roll of the dice as far as introducing some, new parts that will make a noticeable big difference, shall we say, to Pecco's season. That's really the last chance, isn't it? Is there something? But it's hard to imagine if that Ducati wouldn't have brought that out already. To be honest, it wouldn't have already been tried. But potentially, they might have something that they've come up with that he'll try at that test. But really, that's the cutoff for this season, I think, as far as any parts. So really, he's just got to go with the setup and just try and maximise it and aim to sort of get back to where he was, finishing on the podium at least, isn't it? Because one of the big things this weekend with Alex's result that I suppose we should mention is it's given him a big buffer on that second in the championship. And I think that's Alex's main focus now, to be honest. I mean, then that will be massive for the Marquez family, won't it? A 1-2 in the standings. And Alex took a big step towards that with that victory this weekend, and showing that he's capable of getting the big points again. Okay, threw some away in the sprint, which both he and Pecco had been doing, haven't they, in recent rounds? They've both been having bad weekends, so we haven't seen a big swing in the points. But now we're seeing that Alex takes another big chunk. I think it's up to almost 70 points now. Is it
70 odd? Yeah.
That's big. That's big, and it's going to be hard for Pecco to catch him. And I think that'll be mission accomplished for the Marquez family. I think Alex is head screwed on. Mark was interesting, wasn't he, in the press conference, saying how, look, I've been the big brother all the time we've been growing up. Alex knows how to deal with pressure because he's always been against a bigger brother, hasn't he? A physically stronger brother when they were racing, motocross bikes and cycling as kids, and then a brother with more experience and more success, as they got into Grand Prix racing. So he's fine with that. He's used to having that pressure of going up against a Marc Marquez, if you like. So he's in a strong position, I think, Alex, now for that second in the championship, which, let's be honest, a dream result. If you offered him that at the end of last season before he got on the GP24, and said, look, we'll give you second in the championship to Marc, I mean, he would have snapped that up, wouldn't he? And Pecco obviously is the guy that we expected to be Marc's main rival. And really, I think it's going to be a tough job for him now, unless Alex makes the big mistakes, which, as Lewis has said, he's kind of steadied the ship, isn't he? And shown, look, I'm back. I've still got the speed. So Pecco is in a really difficult position, and potentially, will the others catch him, challenge him for third in the championship? We talked about the KTM getting quicker. Bez was a bit unlucky, but the Aprilia had decent speed. Jorge Martin, if he could qualify better, is showing that on the bike as well. You mentioned Iagura. So there's other bikes that are coming up. I think, generally Ducati, they had two sort of get out jail free cards this year with the off-track problems for their main rivals. KTM, the financial crisis, which sort of obviously, as we look back, caused their results to suffer, didn't it, at the start of the year? And then Jorge Martin, the injury crisis for him, which had a knock on for Aprilia because they're suddenly having to reschedule all their plans. They've lost their main rider. So I think that really sort of helped Ducati at a time when, let's face it, they had a difficult preseason with that bike, didn't they? Going back and forth between engines and everything else. And, having those problems with their rivals just sort of let them get off there a little bit, I think. And, but we can see that GP25 is not an easy bike to ride, and Pecco's weekend just sums that up. I mean, for me, I think, and I think Pecco said it, I think the big changes are over now, aren't they? I think it's just, look, this is the bike, just ride it and do what you can with it. But the big concern is next year, isn't it? Because the engine's going to be the same. What can they change? We have to believe it's something to do with the engine, because that's the only thing that they can't change, and they would have changed it before now if it was something they could change.
Exactly.
And I suppose just jumping to something different but related to not being able to make changes, the V4 coming in at Yamaha, if there'll be a lot of talk if it's competitive, well, give it to the race riders for the rest of this season. Obviously, they can change the engine, so that's fine. But there's a bit of a question mark over the aero package, because they've done their 2 updates, I think. So unless the current aero package can fit on the V4, and of course the V4 should be narrower, that's one of the advantages they're hoping for, then they wouldn't be able to give it to the race riders for this season. So maybe we won't see, or it'll only be Augusto that races it this year. We'll have to wait and see. But yeah, for Pecco, I think really Misano test is the last roll of the dice as far as getting any breakthrough this season.
Yeah, nicely covered, Pete. I think for me with him, I always think every weekend this can't get any worse. And when I was thinking the pace he was running on Friday, I think Tardozzi said in FP1 he had an electronical issue, and I was like, right. Okay. I was like, let's see what you can do in the afternoon session. But Lewis done a really good piece on that, and about, was it even the sprint piece as well, Lewis? But the breakdown in time, he's in the second a lap to Marc, and you're thinking, you won here in November. So you did on this 24, and yeah, the bike's changed a lot, but you cannot be that far down to be losing out that much to your teammate. For me, it was like, this guy's defeated. Mentally, he's beat here, so he is.
I don't even think now the rest of the season, or even that weekend, could have been about getting on terms with Marc. It was about getting on terms with the other GP25 of Digia. Because even in that sprint, he was 0.6 a lap slower than Digia. And, Digia had a tricky Friday, then came through Q1, good qualifying, up there in the sprint. And it's like, people on Friday, I made a tweet on Friday, saying that, I think we can categorically say now the bike for Pecco Bagnaia isn't the problem. It is his brain. It's completely gone. They've turned the bike inside out. They've tried X thing, this thing, that thing, and it hasn't worked. And he's constantly in this just cycle of not knowing what to do. Digia has the up and down form, but it does seem to be that he can get more out of it than Pecco. And with all due respect to Digia, I don't think he's a better rider than Pecco Bagnaia. No. I don't think there's many riders better than Pecco Bagnaia, really. So, yeah, I think we are at the point now where you can't. Yeah, the bike's tricky, but you can't blame the bike. It's winning with Marc. It's still able to get podiums with Digia. We didn't see what Digia could do in the Grand Prix on Sunday because he kind of crashed in sympathy with Bez. One of those unfortunate ones where he tried to just jam the brake a bit more, trying to avoid it, which, to be fair, it's like, people think, oh, how can that happen? It's like if you get a bit of a fright and you kind of, you grip onto the table. It's just a reaction. So... it was an unfortunate one there, but Pecco had a good recovery. But we've seen in Grand Prix anyway, he goes better. They tried a new swing arm. I think they went to the swing arm that Digia and Marc has been using this year. Quite why he hasn't been using it this year, I'm not really sure. But then again, maybe that comes back to what Tardozzi said at the weekend on Friday, where he was like, he has to help us to help him, and we've heard that before. I hope he has the attitude to let us help him. And so maybe there's an element there that they've been like, look, try the things that Marc's got on his bike that work, and Pecco's maybe been reluctant and whatnot, because we know with Marc as well, like when it comes to the different aero package and stuff like that, he's very much been like, I'm not sure one way or the other, so I'm just going to go with the thing that I'm comfortable on, which has generally been the older kind of spec of stuff. They brought new chassis, and Marc's very much quite quickly gone, okay, I'm just comfortable in this. Whether it's better or not, I'm comfortable in this one, so I'm going to carry on doing this. And I think that is the case now for Pecco. Basically, they're all, as Pete says, there's not really anything more they can do. He just now needs to adapt to the bike. But, can he adapt to it? Has he kind of mentally beaten himself up too much to be able to adapt to it?
This is my thing. So, see the first half of the season, not the first half. See those first 6 rounds, you look at it. Was Pecco really having a bad season to this point, comparing it to now? It was actually alright.
It was alright, it was his best start to his season.
Where has that gone? Like that's where I want to find. Is it because he's went down a rabbit hole of trying to chase and finding it? Is it just completely rambled him and that's what's threw him off?
I think the problem is obviously you've got he doesn't like the sprint fuel tank, so every Saturday he's not great. And then he gets onto the full fuel tank on the Sunday, he has more grip, he can brake properly, he can carry the speed into the corners like he wants, everything's fine. But it kind of seems like they've kind of gotten a bit stuck as to trying to kind of fix both solutions by only maybe looking at like the Grand Prix, for example. Oh, I can do this in the Grand Prix, but I can't do it in the sprint. And it's like, okay, well, that's fine. You're going to be good in a Grand Prix, so where's the focus been on fixing the sprint stuff? And then they've tried, it didn't work in the sprint, but then we tried this in the Grand Prix, and all of a sudden I felt better. And it's almost as if basically what's happening there is the reason he feels better in a Grand Prix, save for maybe a couple of races like Austria, for example, is just because he feels more comfortable on the full fuel tank, which is what he's been saying for 2 years. So I think just mentally he's gotten too lost as they've gone, why isn't it working Saturday, but we do this and then it works Sunday? The swing arm is kind of a perfect thing. Okay, we change the swing arm and I felt better. And it's like, okay, did the swing arm make you feel good, or did you just feel better because you go better in Grand Prix? I think this is where Ducati have kind of really run up against a brick wall here, is because they know the bike's good. The bike is good. It's maybe not the best Ducati they've ever made, but it's a good bike. Pecco Bagnaia has won a championship on a Ducati that wasn't a great Ducati. The GP23 was quite a difficult bike to ride, difficult on the front end, all those braking problems. He still won the championship on that bike. He is capable of riding bikes that maybe aren't quite perfect. So I think Haj has gotten to a point he's been trying to look for too many different solutions. They haven't worked. Every time they've made a step forward, it's not really been a proper kind of step forward, and then they can't do it. The front brakes are a great example. All right, it worked at Aragon in a hard braking circuit. Can't use them at Mugello. Can't use them at, Assen. Can't use them at these circuits. So that's kind of a waste of time. Whatever they found in Hungary, which we don't know what they found. This is the thing, is we made a breakthrough. We don't actually know what it was they did to the bike. We know that they changed things by a few centimeters and stuff like that, but we don't fundamentally know. That was a new track where by Sunday all the rubber was on it. So was it just a case there was more grip and that's why he felt better? We don't know, because then whatever those fixes were, they tried them in Barcelona and then they binned them for the sprint because they weren't working. So
it's just a cycle.
It's
a true cycle.
nightmare. And he was good in the Grand Prix, yeah, but his pace was 0.6 of a lap slower than Marc's on the same bike, which, okay, there's a lot more overtaking involved, but he made a good step forward, but there's still a big gap there to Marc in terms of pace, so they haven't really gotten him into a position where he can kind of be fighting for podiums. So, where do we go? And again, maybe it goes back to that Bastianini thing, which he said in Hungary, and I instantly went, this doesn't necessarily feel like a directed comment at Pecco, but it does sum things up where if you do everything to the bike and the bike doesn't change things, then you must be the problem. And the way Ducati have talked, he has to help us to help him. He has to have the right attitude, blah, blah, blah. Kind of suggests to me is they're 100% saying to him, the bike isn't the problem. You are the problem, but you're not letting us help you by insisting on all these changes. So, yeah, I think
Yep,
I think we are in a situation where Pecco has just bullied himself so much mentally that any step forward can't really be assimilated properly because it comes from such a bad place of it was so bad, so any improvement is good, but it's actually quite hard to understand if that was a genuine improvement or it was just because he feels stronger on Sundays, as he always has done. And I think even the Misano test is going to be a waste of time because there's going to be so much grip on that circuit. A circuit he knows like the back of his hand. It's not really going to show anything. And then he gets to Japan where they have to use the bigger brake discs. They have to have good, confident in your front end. And he's probably going to start Friday not in a very good vein of form. So it's just... I think Ducati now needs to say, look, here is the bike. We will tweak it here and there in terms of setup. We're not adding anything to it. We're not making any radical changes to it. Ride it, figure it out, get comfortable on it. That's how you're going to be, because that's what Marc's done.
Yeah,
that's what Digi has done.
I think the Pecco can. I don't know if he won't look at it this way, but I mean, think of Ducati riders struggling recently. I think back to Jorge Martin in 22 when he got that package that obviously was a late change with the factory team with the engines and stuff, and Martin didn't really like that engine that they selected. And Martin had a really, compared to his rookie year, which was obviously up and down with crashes, big ones and that, but he still won races and he was on podiums. Martin struggled for 22, had crashes in the lead, but 23 he reset and he got what he wanted and he didn't let that get him down. I hope Pecco can kind of look at it that way and not to, go down a path where he thinks it's never going to get better, but it can't get better, so it can.
Well, the thing is as well is that he developed this bike. A lot of people like to say, "Oh, well, this Ducati built a bike for Marc." They didn't. He was on a GP. He was essentially on like the development GP22 from last year. Like it was the lowest of low spec GP23s. It was like the early testing one. It wasn't even the Valencia spec bike, and he has not had any real input into the development of the bike. The bike, that GP25, was built by Pecco, by Jorge Martin, by Bastianini, by all those guys. Pecco developed this bike. It's his problem to fix by understanding what he has helped kind of develop. He was prescient enough at the start of 2022 to bin off that engine right in Qatar. They were like,
It was in Qatar,
no,
yeah, that's right.
go with a hybrid engine. That's going to be the better one. He knew because he knew the 22 bike didn't work for him. It wasn't going to be competitive. The 21 hybrid engine that he tried and testing in November, that was the better engine. So he understands how to set up a bike. He understands the feeling of a bike. So he can do it. He developed this 24. This 25. Sorry. He knows that his DNA is in that, so he should be able to adapt his riding to it. So I think that's what Ducati needs to do. Is they just need to tell him, look, you developed the bike, ride it. Stop trying to change it. Just ride it, and we'll figure it out that way. We'll figure it out by riding it, not by changing it.
Yeah, it's really difficult, obviously, because, I'm not a MotoGP rider. I don't know how to develop a bike. I just watch, but, it's difficult. It's a real difficult job. I know the lack of testing that we have now and the pressure to get things right from the engineers to the riders to the communication so key. And I really I'm in two parts with this Ducati side, Pete, where you hear Tardozzi. I think the way I look at it, you've got yin and the yang with Tardozzi and Gigi. Gigi very supportive of his riders, obviously, but we don't know what goes on behind the scenes and discussions and stuff. But Tardozzi to me is the vocal point for he needs to help us essentially. But Gigi's like, we will get him back. There's that side, and it's difficult for a factory, isn't it, when you've had a rider who's won 2 world titles and he came close to a third. It must be a real shock to them too.
It must be, yeah. And I think that the key moment in this whole Pecco puzzle, if you like, is going to be when the other guys get on the 25, isn't it? When we get to the Valencia test, you get Alex Marquez, Franco Morbidelli, Fermin Aldeguer. They all get on the 25. What happens next? And that's when we'll know. Was it just a Pecco issue that it didn't suit his style and he's back to the drawing board and trying to fix that? Or do they all... I mean, they probably won't come out and tell us because we know that riders tend to be, careful with what they say, but the lap times won't lie. So we'll see, won't we? I mean, that's going to be, for me, the moment where we'll see exactly which way this sort of story on this season for Pecco ends. Does it end with kind of, well, look, guys, this is what I've been saying, is what these other guys are then saying, or is it, well, actually, the other guys have found a way to ride around, that they might say the sort of the classic, well, it's different, yeah, but you know what? I can make it work. Which way is it going to go? We don't know yet. And we're sort of waiting to find out. That's going to be the key moment for me. I think until that point, as you guys have been saying, it's almost got to sort of loggerheads, isn't it? Where Ducati is saying, look, we've tried loads of things. And in fairness, Pecco is saying, look, I'm trying everything that they're asking me to try. So you've got both sides saying, look, we've done everything we can. But we're not seeing, there's no progress, is there, as we can see from the results on the lap time. So it's where do they go from here? And I think for me that's going to be the key moment. The next big moment that comes up in this story is, what do the other guys say when they get on it? Do they get on it and say it's like the 23? Whereas we saw, Gigi has struggled, Alex Marquez struggled, Bez struggled, didn't they? After having a great year the year before on the 22, winning races, if you count Alex winning the sprint and everything, and then suddenly they really struggled. So we've seen riders go up and down on different versions of the Ducati. What's going to happen with this 25 bike? And it's going to be really interesting to see, I think.
Yeah. Wow, I would not want to be in that team for that discussion when it gets to that test. Well, I would like to be there, but I think it's going to go either way, and it's like, as you say, it really hinges on the others trying it, which, yeah, that'll be a long winter if there's a different opinion. But let's see. We'll go to Misano anyway. We'll just end on predictions. I mean, there's not really much to preview. I think Misano's a good circuit. It surprisingly has some good races at it and dramatic races. I mean, think back to that second Emilia Romagna race we got last year, even with Bastianini and Martin on the last lap. It was pretty tasty. Marquez obviously winning in that weird sort of crossover. Do you not with the weather last year, and he took the win there for Gresini. Yeah, we're going in without the label of Marquez not winning the championship, but as you both touched on at the start of the podcast, this is Ducati territory. This is show who's boss sort of thing. So I imagine Mark will go in thinking, let me try and get one over my old team Gresini as well, because they love winning there, obviously, and they have really good results in the past. And I think that we could be having round 2 of Marquez versus Marquez this weekend, but I think that there'll be other protagonists in there, potentially the Aprilia. I know we thought that in Barcelona, but Lewis, prediction wise, just roughly, are we looking at the others? When I mean the others, I mean like Yamaha, potentially Honda, Aprilia, getting involved with the Ducatis here?
I would expect Yamaha and Honda to have a bit of a better weekend, more grip on track, so that should kind of favour them a little bit. Obviously, we wouldn't have said the same in Barcelona, but Honda was really strong. Yamaha was good with Quartararo, so I don't know. I think, honestly, Bastianini, come Sunday, is going to be a really big threat. I just think with the form he's in right now, he's really, really good around Misano. The KTM does work really well there. I mean, we've seen the KTM's with good results over the past few years. I mean, even for wildcards, I mean, Danny Pedrosa coming in a couple of years ago and was fighting for the podium. So I think Bastianini, and it was really here kind of last year's, Bastianini had one of his really, really better races of his Grand Prix career on that Ducati. We had that really hard fight with Martin and, got his elbows out. So
Yeah.
I think with the KTM working as it is, with the Bastianini's strength around Misano and the fact he can hold on to his tyres, which will be really important. I do just think this could be his opportunity.
Pete, do you share that? Do you think that out of the KTMs especially, and Acosta did go okay last year, I mean he crashed a few times, but Bastianini's the guy here, isn't he, for the, how can I say, the Ducati sort of slayer he could be almost.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, right from his rookie year in MotoGP, wasn't it? Misano was the track where he really...
That's right, yeah, good point.
His first sort of, the moment where we went, wow, this guy, he can really make it in this class was Misano in his rookie year. And so, yeah, I think that's a great call. I think, yeah, Bastianini, yeah, I mean, maybe even the favourite for Sunday, perhaps over the long race. We need to see how the tyre wear is. We don't know exactly, would it be a gamble on the compounds or will it be clear? Who knows? As I say, I think Mark's going to be fired up. So he's and we could just assume he's going to be up there. I think, can't we? So I won't. I'll leave him. I'll say, look, who's likely to fight him? Alex in the sprint. I think he'll be, as you say, Gresini home track. We know how good he is at the first part of the race, as Mark said as well. Alex is kind of the first part, Mark's the second. So if Alex can carry this momentum in, get a good qualifying, I think that he'd love to win for Gresini there on the sprint. And yeah, I'll say yeah, with like you guys, I think Bastianini's certainly capable of doing it on Sunday.
Yeah, I think Enea will be on the podium. I don't know. It's just this circuit, and I think that Ducati, the way it has been around there in the past. I mean, when was the last time there was a non-Ducati winner at Misano? Was it Marc on the Honda in 21? Was that be right? Yeah, I think
Probably,
so.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Dominated.
And
that was a weird race too. So
Pecco crashed that race while leading, so
it was all
that
tire
was a race
choice.
that
All
Fabio
that.
won the championship. Yeah,
That's right. Yeah. So I think if Bastianini would go and beat Marquez here, that would probably be the surprise of the season for me, because Marquez, just the way he is around Misano, and no matter if he's always had a bad bike, I always think back to 15 and stuff. It was a weird race with the Yamahas and the rain and the changeover. He was still fast that weekend in practice, and he had something. He always delivers, even in the wet. He delivers there. I think his best performance in the wet, arguably, there's a few of them, is his one against Danilo Petrucci in 17 when he put in the fastest lap of the race on the last lap in the wet, and there's a great clip of Santi Hernandez and him speaking after, and he was watching the data, and he was like, you lost the front, it was locking like 12 times on the last lap, and Mark had noticed that the best line to take on that last lap that he didn't show Petrucci was the outside of the circuit, because he had seen Moto2 riders doing it, and it was like, this is worth the risk, and he was in a real tight title fight with Dobby then too. So this circuit for me is Mark's, it's one of those underrated circuits for results. And I think you've seen it in the Mugello with how he was when he won there in front of the Ducati fans. I mean, this is very much Valentino Rossi territory as well. Misano, I think he loves winning here, and it really gives him something. And if it can set up a match point for Motegi, he'd bite your hands off for it. So he would. So if he can't win it here, he wants to set it up here, and I think it's going to be the case. I think Mark will win both races. So yeah, I think it's going to be a good weekend ahead. The test will be really interesting. that's the main focus. We'll look at that next week. Lewis might not be here because he might be tired from traveling, because Lewis will be at Misano for something special at least. Yeah, but we'll see what happens in the test. It's something to keep an eye out for. We'll cover all that, and yeah, let's see what happens in Misano. Always an interesting weekend. And yeah, if you enjoyed the podcast, like, subscribe, comment if you're watching on YouTube, 5-star review on Apple and Spotify, Acast as well. You can leave a note review there, and it helps us go up the Apple charts. And we'll see you then. Take care.